Today, we're going to go through three different topics, and they're all kind of on the negative side of banking, but it's really good information just to have in your back pocket for the future. So, we're going to start with negative banking history. And what negative banking history is, what happens is if you don't pay your bills on time or you keep overdrafting, so you're spending more money that's in your account, the bank would close your account on your behalf. And they would say you cannot bank here. And when that happens, you go on a registry essentially that all the banks look at, and they can look at that and say, I don't know if I want to open up an account for Sarah because at her last bank it was closed. So you become risky. But there's a way to get off of that registry in a sense. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we say negative banking history, what do we need? So what do you do when you have a negative banking history but still need a bank account? So those folks who can't open up an account anymore doesn't mean we still don't need a bank account. So what can you do? So some of the things that, like I said, that you could happen, that the account ends up closing on your behalf and putting you on this registry. Outstanding debt with a former bank. So you bounce checks, which people don't necessarily use checks anymore, unpaid bank fees, fraud on the account. So sometimes if somebody steals your account or does fraud on your account, the bank will close it just for your safety. But if that fraud is never dealt with appropriately, like the police aren't called and the bank doesn't reimburse you and get the fraud off of your account, saying, this really wasn't Sarah, this was a fraudster, a scammer, that can affect your eligibility or your availability to, or your, not your availability, your, I don't know what the word is. It can affect you getting a bank account in the future. Bad credit, absolutely. If you've never had an account before and have bad credit, we're not talking about no credit. We're talking about bad credit. There's a difference. Some people might not open up an account for you. Payment delinquency, what that means, say you had a credit card, you're not paying your credit card bill on time, you're late on all your payment. That's called delinquency. Errors made by a reporting agency. So there's absolutely errors that can be put on your credit report or on your bank account. That's why you need to always track those type of things. And that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing with these kind of webinars, is for you to kind of learn how to manage the financial world, manage your banking history, things like that. Account abuse, such as daily limit overages. So a lot of banks, a lot of times, will set a limit to how much cash you can withdraw at the ATM or how much you can spend with your debit card. Usually it's a pretty big amount. Most people don't go over that in a day. If they do, they get an exception, things like that. But when you do go over, there's a lot of work that has to be done on the bank side to track that, to make sure that it's not fraud, to make sure nobody stole your debit card, things like that. But if you continue to do that without communicating with the bank, sometimes they'll close your account. So there's a lot of things that can happen with your bank account that you end up on this registry that says, hey, they're not a trustworthy person, so don't open an account for them. These are just a couple of examples here. So what do you do when it happens? So the registry, and I don't like using the word registry, but essentially it's called check systems. It's kind of a central registry that anybody can look at in the banking world. So it doesn't matter if you bank at UBT or you work at UBT, US Bank, Cornhusker, Great Western, they all can get into this one system called check system. And that's kind of where they do your background report when it comes to banking. So it's not a legal thing. It's just your banking history, and they can see it to see if you're eligible or a trustworthy individual that they should loan money to or open up an account for. So if you find out that you're on check system, one of the first things you should do is pull your credit report. You can get your credit report every year, and everybody has one for free on Annual Credit Report, or go to any of the three big credit bureaus, Experian. I'm blanking now. I can't even think of what they are. Experian is always the one I go to. And you can pull your credit, and that will show you everything money related that has happened under your name. So if a credit card has been taken out, a loan, all your payment history, every single time you've made a payment for anything, how much money's in the bank for you, how many accounts you have, anything money related is on your credit report. So you want to go through that and find out if there's something on there that doesn't belong to you. I've seen things even with my former husband. He had somebody else's information on his credit report because their social security numbers were only one number off. So it was just an accident. So he called the credit bureau, he called Experian, and they took it off and everything was fine. It was just an accident. But those are the things you want to look for. If there's a loan that's not yours, we need to figure that out. We need to get that off of your credit report. Um, so that's the first thing you should do. Then pay your outstanding fees and correct them. So here's how this works. If your bank account has closed and you can't get another one because you have fees, or you owe the bank money because of overdraft fees, or maybe you had a credit card and you haven't paid it off, something like that, you need to simply pay it off. You could go into any bank. It doesn't matter what bank you've banked at, but if you do remember where you were banking, go there. You can ask them, hey, I think I'm on the check system. Can you pull the report? They'll pull it off the system, which will say what was wrong. What happened that your account is closed that makes you um, not eligible for another one. And it will show the fees. And then you pay it off. It'll say what bank it's at. So if you went to UBT and they pulled your name under the check system and they said, oh, yeah, at US Bank, you had a bank account, you owe them $115 in fees, then you can go on over to US Bank and pay those fees off. And then US Bank will then report back, or any bank, doesn't matter which one it is, will report back to check systems and say, okay, they've paid this off, it's clear, and your name will get pulled off that registry, which is really nice because just because you've had negative banking history doesn't mean you can't get another account at another time. So it's actually a good thing. I actually worked with a gentleman. He was just leaving prison. He had done his time. He was trying to get everything back in order, and he knew he needed a bank account for a job. And he didn't even remember what bank he was at when his account closed. But I said, go through UBT drive-through, ask them to pull your report. And he did. And he found out that he owed, I think it was about $225. And he found out what bank it was at. And him and his parole officer worked to get that paid off. It was amazing. It was super easy for him. And now he's eligible to open up an account anywhere he wants because his name is no longer on the check system. So it is a reversible issue if you've had this happen to you. You just have to take care of it. And it's okay if you find out your fees are a certain amount and you can't pay them all at once. Go back to that bank and just start making payments because eventually your name will get taken off of that check systems, and then you can open up accounts as you need them. How long until I can get an account? Typically, it takes about a month for the bank to report back to check system that you've paid off your fees and your account is good. And then after that, you can open up account. You can also get a letter from that bank stating that you paid it off and you've taken care of everything you need to. And you could take that letter to the next bank and say, look, it's a verified statement saying that everything's fine. So if you need an account immediately and you've paid off your fees to get off check system, the bank can actually just write you a letter. It's almost like a letter of recommendation to say, hey, you're eligible now. If you don't have credit, just FYI, because check systems can definitely affect your credit if you're on that list. You can still get bank accounts. Just because you don't have good credit or any credit doesn't mean you can't get a bank account, including minors. So a lot of you on this call are minors. You can get bank accounts. You just have to have a legal guardian sign off for you. So it could be your biological parents, it could be foster parents, it could be your guardians if you have one. Anybody who's eligible to sign off on that is able to, so you can get bank accounts, but their name is still on the account. The only time if you don't have credit that's going to be a problem is if you're trying to get a credit card or a loan, which we have a whole nother lesson on what to do to build your credit or to increase it. So we'll do that another time if we haven't already. So that is what to do if you have negative banking history. Does anybody have any questions about that while I switch slides? No? Okay. We're going to go into collections, and I'm going to tell you about how collections work, what it is. Can somebody tell me if they can see that?
I can see it on your screen.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. So collections. Let's talk about collections. It's basically another way to collect a debt, collections companies. So, what is a debt collections? Debt collections is also known as collections. It's the process of recovering money owed to the bank by its customer. And it doesn't have to be just a bank. Hospitals do this with medical charges, credit card companies, loan companies. Collections is just another agency that does the work for the company to collect on old debt. So, if you stopped paying on something that you owe, so if I stopped paying on my car payment, a collections company would eventually take over and try to impound my car or recover the money that I owe them. So it's just another company doing that. There's a lot of things with collections that you need to know about. There's a lot of legal things that they can and cannot do, but I want to teach you just about the process because my goal would be that you never have to deal with collections, that you never have issues with collections because you know what they do and why they do it. So if we can avoid this with good money habits, then you'll never have to deal with collections. And I have some really good stories too to kind of explain the importance of that. So every company deals with collections differently. So when I say every company, I mean banks, credit card companies, loan companies, everybody, medical debt, things like that. Everybody deals with it differently, meaning they don't always just ask a collections company to come to swoop in and save the day. They could actually have an internal collections company where they do it themselves. I know UBT does for a long time. They'll do it themselves and then they'll pass it off to a collections company because it costs them money. So to use a collections agency, it costs the company money. So they're going to avoid doing that as long as they can. But there are situations that they have to get them involved. This presentation is specifically about what UBT does because it's dealing with all money. So we offer loans, car loans, mortgage loans, so to buy a house. We do personal loans, bank accounts, retirement services, all these things. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about collections today. It's just our process of things. But this is really just to give you a heads up on how it works. So medical debt. So UBT as a bank partners with different hospitals around the area that if a patient needs to finance, meaning they need to go on a payment plan to pay back their medical debt, UBT kind of heads that up. So we're kind of in charge of that. So we kind of look at it as kind of a loan. So if there's an emergency and you get a bill because you're in the emergency room, but you can't pay it off all at once, you could essentially sign up to deal with it like a loan. So you're just making payments over a period of time, which is nice. So the hospitals around here just contract with us to do that. So when you have a medical debt you cannot pay, call the hospital and make payment arrangements. That should really be your first line of defense. Don't wait for things to go into collections. It's going to cost you interest, it's going to cost you money and time. Um, the hospitals here in Lincoln and most hospitals will have a patient financing program, which means you can make payments and really to keep yourself out of collections, to keep yourself from being um, called all the time and things like that. Just any amount will help. So if you could pay $5, $10 a month on a medical debt, it's better than nothing. They just want to make sure that there's money rolling in and you didn't forget about them. A lot of hospitals have and doctors' offices have hardship qualifications, meaning they'll lower your payment or actually kind of forgive some of the debt that you owe them. So, depending on your qualifications. So, if you make a certain amount of money or um, just maybe you're disabled or something like that, they can actually lower your payments or they could just get rid of the debt altogether. But here's the big thing to keep yourself out of collections is just communicate with the medical provider or collections agency, even if it is in collections. So if you have a medical debt, communicate. A lot of times we think of collectors, debt collectors as someone who calls and harasses you all the time. They call you multiple times a day. Well, if you just picked up the phone and called them, they wouldn't do that. If you were to say to them, I can't make any payments this week, I'll call you next week, and you just keep following up that way, they're way more likely to work with you and you won't get the phone calls. So they just want to hear from you. And that's something that a lot of people don't do. So keeping your debt out of collections is the utmost importance. So especially medical debt, well, any debt, but with medical debt, the hospitals and doctors' offices are really willing to make payment arrangements with you rather than throwing it to collections. So don't avoid the bills that you may get in the future. Just call them and say, hey, I can't afford this. What can I do? And they're going to look at all the options that they have for you. Vehicle debt, the way UBT does this. is between 20 and 30 days. If you have not paid your car payment, there'll be phone calls, text messages, voicemails, and emails to you. So UBT is going to do everything that they can to get a hold of you. After 30 days that you have not paid a payment or gotten in touch with them, they're going to report the non-payment to the credit bureau, which means it's going to go on your credit report, which makes your credit score to go down. So it's better to just communicate, because if there's something that UBT can do, they're going to. Otherwise, they're going to report you. And then after 60 days that there's no payment, they do send a referral over to a repossession company to try to repossess your car, which is a really interesting way that they do this. The repossession companies, I got to hear all about it when I was developing this curriculum. But they will literally search your social media and say, "Oh, they were just at the mill getting coffee 30 minutes ago." And they might show up to the mill and look for your car and just put it on the back of a tow truck and walk and drive away with it. Like, they'll search you out and just show up. Or if somebody sees it and reports it because they say they work for the company, they'll just show up wherever you're at and just take your vehicle. So repossession companies work pretty hard to find your car in a very short amount of time. So you can't really hide from them. But that's after 60 days. So that's only 2 payments that have not been paid that a company like UBT is going to send out a referral to get your car repossessed, because they're going to try to get that car back, and then they're going to sell it and try to make their money back for the loan. A big thing to keep yourself out of collections or getting your car repossessed is communicate with the bank. There's a lot of things that they can do if you can't make your car payment. UBT, and again, this isn't every lender, everybody who's going to loan money, but UBT will try to lower your payments up to 3 months. So if you're just struggling to pay your payment that month, maybe you lost your job, by calling them, if that's where you have your loan at, they'll lower your payment for 3 months just to help you out. They'll do hardship extensions. So they'll let you skip one payment every 6 months. And what they do is they take that payment and they just tack it onto the end. So you end up paying the payment, but you won't have to pay it until the end of the loan. And you could do this up to 5 times. So that's 2 skips every year. So that's pretty good. So that's something that they're willing to offer. Or they'll change the loan terms. So what that means is they'll go back and say, okay, well, you owe, $5,000 on this car. Let's refinance it, and you're supposed to pay back 5,000 in the next 2 years. Let's make it 4 years. So that's going to change your car payment during the month. So this is something that UBT does within the first month if you're just struggling to pay your bills. So it definitely is something worth doing, because then it doesn't affect your credit. You're communicating with the bank, and you get to keep your car in the process. So we're just switching it up for you to make sure that you keep your transportation. But we need to know. You need to call us and communicate. And that goes for anybody who's loaned you anything. Communication is really, really key. So repossession, even though the car is sold, this is something I honestly did not know this until I was making this curriculum. If your car is repossessed, the bank is going to take the car back and they're going to sell it. So let's say you have a $15,000 car, they take it back, but they're only able to get $10,000 for it. It's a used car now. No one's going to pay more than $10,000. So there's still $5,000 out there that you should have owed, and they're going to make sure that you pay it back. So they're going to garnish your wages. They're going to still send you bills. So just because your car or whatever it is repossessed doesn't mean you don't still owe the bank money. And that's not a UBT rule. That's a general rule. If something is repossessed, you still owe money for it. Okay. So a lot of people will buy cars that they can't afford, try to pay them, and then after a few months, it gets repossessed and they think, well, I lost my car. At least I don't have the car payment anymore. Nope, you still will owe the money, and it will go on your credit report as a collections debt. And a lot of people will still try to get a hold of that money. So just know that it's not a free for all just because you lost your car. And what's really important too, if you move or have a different phone number for anything that you have a bill for, you need to communicate with that company to update that, because that's part of the deal, is that if they can't get a hold of you, just because you change your phone number doesn't mean that the bank doesn't think that you're not communicating. So you can't just change your phone number and think everything's fine. So for me, I pay my bills on time. But if I were to move, I'm going to let my bank know immediately, and I'm going to let my work know immediately, and I'm going to let people know so that they can get a hold of me. Because if something were to happen and they can't get a hold of me, they might think the worst. Oh, she's avoiding us. Oh, she's not going to pay her bills anymore. Um, her mail's being returned back to us that we're sending. We're sending her a bill and she's not getting it. And then they can go and repossess my car or something like that, just simply because I moved. So it's really important that, especially being young, you're probably not in the same place you're going to live the rest of your life. But as you move, get new phone numbers, communicate with the people, big companies in your life like banks, so that they know how to get a hold of you, especially because there's always fraud that can happen on your account and they need to know how to get a hold of you. All right, credit cards. So if you have a credit card and you don't want to pay on it, this is what happens. If you get a credit card bill and it's more than 30 days past due, UBT and other banks will just simply turn off your credit card. You cannot use it anymore, and you must pay it before it will be turned back on. So if your credit card suddenly doesn't work, it's because you're likely past due on your payment, and that's only 1 month past due, and you need to call to get it turned back on. Debt workouts are rare. That means sometimes people cannot pay their whole credit card bill. They just simply can't in order to get it turned back on. Sometimes they are willing to reduce how much you owe. So they'll basically forgive some of your debt, but it's very, very, very rare. What they will do a lot of times is reverse some of the fees, like a late fee or a delinquency fee. They're willing to give that back to you to reduce your overall payment. But it's very rare that you could get credit card debt forgiven. So just keep that in mind. And all of these type of workouts that they're willing to do, you do have to um, apply for it. There are fees that roll into that. And sometimes they'll actually take your balance from the credit card. So if you owed $1,000 and they'll turn off your credit card, but treat it like a loan. So now you're paying on a loan for 5 years or something like that, which is actually, it's not, if that's all you can do, it's better than nothing, because it will still be reported to the credit bureau and you could actually kind of help your credit with that if you're paying your payments on time. But all of this is done by application and not everybody's going to get it. So just remember that just because you don't pay your credit card on time doesn't mean it's not going to affect you in the long run, any of this. So after 60 days, your account will be closed. And with secured credit cards, which I believe we've talked about this, that's where you have to put down basically a security deposit for a secured credit card, and that will be forfeited. So the bank will keep all of that money and you won't get that back. So there's various things that they'll do for credit cards. But again, the moral of the story is, if you communicate with your bank, there are things that they can help you with so that you're not late, or they don't have to turn off your credit card or something like that. So it's always good to communicate with them to see what they can do. Checking account. So we just talked about negative banking history. So this is what happens with checking accounts, your everyday account, when negative things happen in it. So if you're overdrafting a lot, which means you're spending more than what's in your account, your chart every time you swipe your card, your debit card, you're going to get charged around, most places are $30 to $40 every single time. So if you went to multiple places today, swiped your card, and you didn't have money in your account to cover it, you're going to get $30 to $40 charged to your account every time you swiped. So a lot of times it could be hundreds of dollars in one day. So a lot of times people just don't pay that off. They just let the account close, and they have all these overdraft fees, which could be hundreds or thousands of dollars. And if that were to happen to you after 60 days, the bank will close your account. They're going to say, nope, you can't use this account. You're not even putting money into it. You owe us money. We're going to close it. If you are negative, so if you owe money in there, they're going to close your account, but UBT will negotiate a payment plan to bring the funds current. So they'll work with you to try to get that paid off. You will be reported to that check system, so that registry. And once it's paid in full, so once you paid off, check system will be notified and you can get a bank account again. So it's not the end of the world if this happens. There's ways to fix it, but you have to do it. You have to be proactive to call the bank and say, how much do I owe? Can I go on a payment plan? I could do $100 now or $100 later, whatever that looks like for you. But you will be on that check system, and it is likely that there will be no banks that will open up an account for you in the meantime. It's super important to contact your bank if you have a negative account. So if you ever, this is a fun, helpful hint for anybody with a checking account. If you ever overdraft, so you spent more today than you have in your account and you get charged a fee, call your bank as soon as you can. Because if it was simply an accident, you get paid tomorrow, you thought you had some money in there, you have the money now to put it back. A lot of times banks will actually put that fee back in there. They'll give you back your money, as long as it's not a consistent thing. I would say most people I know who even have good jobs or extra money, they overdraft. It happens. It's not a rare thing to overdraft. Sometimes, I recently did it because I had money, only a certain amount of my checking, and then I have a savings, and I just didn't pull it over. Like I pay a certain amount of my bills and pull it over from savings, and I just didn't do that, and I didn't realize it was happening. So I just called the bank and they forgave that charge because I had the money to put in there. So they're willing to work with you if you're just honest with them. I had a branch manager on. He works at UNL campus, and his name is Patrick, and he was saying that he is much more willing to work with you if you have an overdraft fee and forgive it if you're nice and you just communicate. Don't communicate 3 weeks later. Communicate tomorrow. Communicate today. He said he doesn't mind helping. He works with mainly college students, and he said, I don't mind helping them understand this process, by forgiving them that $34 that we charge. But I want to hear their story. I want to hear that it was a mistake. And he's a pretty good read if you're lying to him, but just be honest. It was a mistake. Is there any way that you'll forgive some of these overdraft charges? And they'll do it. Most of the time they will. So that's always helpful. So if you can pick up the phone and call and just ask, get some of your money back. Just do it. It's worth the try, because the worst thing that will happen is they say no. Well, you've already been charged this fee anyway, so you're just going to have to pay it. So you're still in that predicament anyway, so you might as well try. So that's always something to aim for. Some of the big things, super important. If you're having financial trouble, say you lost your job and you don't know how to pay your bills, call the bank or call the company that you owe money to, even if it's your electricity company or, your landlord or something like that. Call them, have a conversation about your situation, because as long as they know and they'll note it on your account, you may not end up in collections. You may not end up with extra fees, and you just have to, get back on your feet. Debt collectors would rather get to know your situation early than have to repossess your car or close your account. So even banks, they want to get to know your situation. And most times people go to the same bank location. So you get to know the people there. They really do want to just know your situation. If you're having trouble, they're going to want to help you. I get people all the time from banks, at UBT, that they talk to a banker and they get sent to me because they're just having trouble paying their bills. So what can I do to help them as a financial coach? So I work with a lot of people that way. So just call, make the call, go into the branch, just talk to them. It's a very adult thing to do. You got to learn how to do this. You got to learn to ask for help when things like this come up, so that in the future, if you need more help, you know how to do it. And there's people like me that are here to teach you how to do this, teach you how to have this conversation, because I know that, with the younger generation like yourselves, having a conversation on the phone is very rare, and having a conversation about money is even more rare. So if you need help learning how to have the conversation, reach out to your PALS worker, because I know that they'll know how to do it. And I know that if they don't, they're going to come to me and ask. So we want to teach you how to have these conversations so that you can save some of your money. There's no reason you should get fees if you can get them back. So keep information updated with anybody, your creditor, if you're in collections, or your bank, your credit card company. Just make sure you're updating your information, because people need to know how to get a hold of you. And if they can't get a hold of you, they're going to throw you in collections or they're going to close your account because they're going to think you're avoiding them. So make sure you're always updating your information. You will always be notified in advance if there's missed payments or delinquencies. So banks, creditors will always, they legally have to try to get a hold of you. They'll knock at your door sometimes. They'll text you, they'll email you, they'll send you stuff in the mail. And if they cannot get a hold of you, that's when it goes to collections or repossession. So I know we all have stories of somebody who got their car repossessed or their account closed or something got thrown in collections and nobody contacted them. It's simply not the case. Legally, they have to show that they have done a certain amount of work to get a hold of you. So that's why it's super important to keep your information updated. If you finance your car, so if you get a loan for your car with extra on top, get gap insurance. So this is kind of a way out there scenario, but sometimes if you have a car and say you trade it in, but you still owe money on it, the trade-in isn't enough, you can put that extra amount on your new loan. And so there's what's called gap insurance to make sure if something were to happen to your new car, that it's going to cover that extra amount that you put on top of that loan. So it's kind of a weird concept, but gap insurance is really important with car loans. There's a lot of things with like if somebody dies. So if a loved one dies, contact the bank about any loans that they have. So if I were to pass away, I have a car loan. So I would want, whoever's taking over for me to call the bank and say, hey, she's passed away, but she has this loan. What do we do about it? So we want to do that for others because if the bank doesn't know they've passed away, they're going to just think they're not paying on their loan. And so it gets really complicated that way. So if a loved one dies, you need to call all their creditors at the same time. Co-signers on a loan are still responsible for debt. I think we've talked about this. If you have a car loan or a personal loan and somebody has signed on it and you stop paying, your co-signer is responsible to pay. And if you co-sign on a loan for someone or co-sign on a credit card and they stop paying, you're responsible to pay. So this is co-signing should be done very cautiously. It is most of the time not a good idea, especially at an early age, to co-sign for someone. Sometimes we need a little extra help to have a co-signer, but I would caution you to be a co-signer because we want to make sure that who we're co-signing for is responsible enough to pay their debt. Otherwise, you are responsible for it. And if it goes to collections, you're responsible. Your credit is going to be affected in the long run and everything in between. So we want to be really wise about that. Okay, that is the end of this one. Any questions? That was a lot of information. Okay, we're going to quickly move into payday loans. Can we see that?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. Okay, payday loans. A lot of people know what these are. I believe there's over 15 payday loan companies here in Lincoln alone, and all but one are north of Highway 2. And I think there's about 9 on O Street within a 3-mile radius. Not even radius. In a straight line, there's 9 of them on O Street. So anywhere from the Haymarket to about 48th Street. So in that very small space, there's 9 payday lenders. I think one just closed. I heard on 27th and O Street, it closed. It's now just a cell phone company. Somebody told me
The
that
one
the other day.
on 48th and O just closed too. That kept on getting robbed.
Oh, really? That's great.
Next to
Great to hear.
Chick-fil-A. Anyways.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Right there by Super Saver.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. There's one less now. Super. Okay, let's talk about payday loans and how evil they are. Sorry, I'm a little biased on this. Okay, payday loans. Payday loans are short-term loans funded or given to you with the promise of payment. So there's an option to go into a payday lender, get a loan because you're saying I'm going to pay them back. That's how loans work, right? The only thing is with payday loans, they have the opportunity to charge ridiculous interest in a very small amount of time and make it almost impossible for you to pay it off. So if you take out a payday loan, most of the time you have 2 to 4 weeks to pay it back before you're charged interest. If you do not pay that back within 2 weeks, it is likely that you will never pay back that loan because the interest is so high and they put it right on top. So you can go in for $100 and in 2 weeks, they're going to charge you a lot of times about 50%. So now you owe $150. And then the next time you're going to owe them like $225. And then, so it's every week, it's compound interest. They throw your interest charge back on the original loan amount. So if you go in there saying, the point is to say, I get paid next Friday, but I need money now. Well, you take out this loan, you pay whatever you need to pay, but next Friday comes along, you still don't have money if you have to pay back that payday loan because now you're paying it back and you're out of money again. So that's why people get stuck. And it is one of the meanest things I think anybody could do when it comes to money. There are 23,000 payday lenders in the US alone. That's twice as many locations as McDonald's. So if we think about how many McDonald's we see even in Lincoln, which I don't feel like we have a ton, but we have enough. There's double that usually of payday lenders. So it's more accessible to people than even McDonald's is, which is very scary. All right, how do they work? This is the process of a payday lender. If cash is needed immediately, payday lenders will loan up to a certain amount in cash immediately. So they do have a cutoff point, and it's just a couple $100 usually. So you can't ask for more than that. But if you need it, they can give it to you. A credit check isn't required, so anyone is eligible for this. But you must have a bank account or be able to write checks. So you have to have a bank account that they can verify, and if you have a check, it's even better. They're going to charge you interest. So you're getting a loan. So obviously with a loan, you have to pay them back for the privilege of using their money. And their interest charges come in weekly, every 2 weeks, or monthly. Those are common. So they can even charge you 44%, I think is Nebraska's limit. 44% every week. Okay, that's a lot. So if you took out $100, they're going to charge you $44 every week. That's a lot of money. That's an excessive amount of money to be paying back. Interest charges vary, but on average, you can expect $15 to $20 for every $100 you borrow. So most places will charge you anywhere from $15 to $20 for every 100 that you borrow. So if you borrow $500, you're going to get charged $100, and it could be every week. So now you don't owe $500, you owe $600, and then the next week the same thing and the same thing. That's why you get stuck. How it works is when you walk in and you say, I need this much money, they're going to confirm that you have a bank account. They want to know how to get to you. You'll need to sign a check for the loan amount. So if I needed to borrow $400 from a payday lender, I would write them a check for $400 because what they're going to try to do is in those 2 weeks, cash my check because I'm saying I get paid next Friday. So they're going to go cash my check next Friday to try to get their money back. You will need to return to the lender or the payday lender in the amount of time agreed. So I could go in next Friday and say, okay, this is when we agreed. Here's your money. Otherwise, they're going to go to the bank and cash my check. They would rather have you come in, though. That's their thing. They're going to hold off on that check for as long as they can because they're going to charge you interest. But here's the key is they know how to access your bank account now. They know how your bank account number. They know where you bank. So they know how to track you down, which is kind of scary. Doesn't mean that that's uncommon, but you owe them money and they're going to try to get it back. So they're going to start getting really aggressive with you about how to get their money back. So the interest is really the problem here. There's nothing wrong with getting a loan. I'm not saying you can't get a loan, but it's the interest that they're charging you. So in Nebraska, this is how it breaks down. This is the actual amounts that they charge you. So you could get up to $500 for up to 34 days. So you could walk in and say, I need $500 and they could do this. This is the most they'll do is say, okay, you need to pay it back in 34 days. But they're going to start charging you finance charges after 2 weeks. So half of the way through. And what they do in Nebraska is around $17.65 per 100 borrowed. which ends up being in a 14-day loan, 459%. And this is the annual percentage rate. So the way this is calculated is if you were to use this math for a year, you're going to be charged 459% from your original loan, which is a massive amount of money. We can also look at it this way. We borrowed $500. Say our finance charge is 20%. So that's $20 for every 100. The way they do that is 20% interest divided by 365 days of the year, because they're going to look at an annual percentage rate. That number is 73. This is really confusing. 73 divided by 14-day period is approximately 5.214. Then they multiply that by 100 and you get your annual percentage rate of 521%. It's very complex, but what this translates into is that you're paying them back way more than you borrowed in the first place. Way more, to the point that it might not ever be paid back. And I have watched YouTube videos, like interviews from news shows, like recently, about people's stories about paying back their payday loans, and they had to refinance their house. They had their car, they had to sell their car or it got repossessed, and they paid back thousands and thousands of dollars more than they originally borrowed. And it was heartbreaking. It was so sad to see it. This may seem like a large number, but it's a reality. Nebraska payday lenders are allowed to charge up to 459% annually. And if you're unable to pay back that loan within the agreed upon period, your total charges will be rolled into the new charge. So if you originally borrow $500, you could be charged up to $2,795 in a year to take out that $500. Okay. So that's, most people can't pay back that $500 right away. That's why we're taking out loans. And so they're going to charge you a little bit of interest over the next year, and it's all going to just go right back on how much you owe. So it may be only $50 the first week, but it's $50 the next week, and then $50. And it accumulates over time, and it ends up being so much more money than you originally took out. Okay. Any questions on this? The math is really confusing, but really it just translates into paying a lot more back than you originally borrowed. If you cannot pay it back within the original amount, usually 2 weeks, then you're likely going to have to start paying a massive amount in interest. Any questions before we move on? Okay, we're going to kind of power through the rest of this. That was the main part. So predatory strategies of payday lenders. So like I was saying, that there's a certain amount of payday lenders here in Lincoln. And actually, I'm going to go to this slide. And all but one are north of Highway 2. Okay, so we could see Highway 2 there towards the bottom. But you see towards the middle of your screen where it says More Pawn and Furniture, Advance America. More Pawn and Furniture is not a payday lender, but I'm just pointing that out. Where More Pawn and Furniture is on the map is O Street. You could see that a lot of those red ones are right there on O Street. It's a massive amount. It's good to know that 2 are closed now, which is great. But you could see that they're strategically located in certain parts of town. Okay. O Street has a lot more businesses there. There's a lot more nightlife. There's a lot more because college kids are there. There's just a lot going on around O Street. So there's a lot more payday lenders there. They use strategies to get customers. So they'll go to low income neighborhoods where there's higher employment rates, minorities. They'll look at where people are not able to qualify for regular loans. Where people live that have really bad credit or no savings. They're going to find the neighborhoods that have that. So you can see, though, on this map, it's all over. It's all over Lincoln, and that's just Lincoln. It doesn't mean there's not any outside of it, but they're very strategic about where they are placed. And so they make it so they're bright buildings. There's a lot of lights. You notice them. So if you're in a situation where you don't have any money and you're looking for a payday lender, you're probably going to find one pretty quickly because of how they market themselves. Most payday lenders are very aggressive when it comes to getting their money back meaning they're going to try to contact you regularly and maybe even take legal action if the loan is not paid on time. They'll probably stretch it out because they want to charge you interest, but they could end up taking you to court to try to get money back. And they're going to win because you signed a contract with them to pay back the loan. And if you don't, the courts are going to tell you that you have to. And you're going to have to pay court fees and their court fees because they're going to win. So it is a very scary situation to be put in with a payday lender. I'm just going to be honest with you because of how aggressive they're going to get to try to get their money back and because you're going to owe a lot more than you originally took out. So what do we do? What do we do if we need a payday loan or we feel like that's our only option? There are several things that we can do. If you have a payday loan, pay it back as soon as you can and commit to never using a payday loan again. So even though you're being charged interest, put as much money onto that loan as you possibly can. You can make payments. You don't have to pay it all back at one time, but try to get that loan paid off as soon as possible. Ask to set up a payment plan with the lender. So you can go back to that payday loan place and go on a payment plan. Take on more hours at work. Sometimes it means getting another job or taking on more hours just to get this thing paid off. Sell any unneeded personal property online. So I use Facebook Marketplace a lot just to sell things around my house that I don't need, especially because I have a young kid that grows out of clothes all the time and toys. So it's something you could do if you could sell some of your stuff and then take that money and go put it on your payday loan. Just get that thing paid off. Personal loans through banks are really rare. Banks usually don't give a personal loan. You have to have a reason for the loan. But if they do, and some banks offer them, get the loan because your interest rate will be fixed, meaning it's not going to change and it's going to be way lower. So like we said, with payday loans, they can charge you, the APR was 459%, where at a bank, it's going to be 6%. It's going to be much, much lower for the course of the year. So you're paying back less money. Work with a financial coach to readjust your budget so you can get the loan paid off right away. So that's me. If you need to work with me or your PALS worker to work on where can we change your budget so that you could pay off this loan, do it. And then contact a debt consolidation company to help. So this is kind of with folks that have a lot of debt, thousands of dollars in debt. You can consolidate it, get on a program. It still costs some money to do that, but in the long run, it pays off and set up a payday loan. To avoid payday lenders, create a budget. This is kind of looking ahead, especially if you're just starting out with a new job. Create a budget and work with a financial coach if needed or your PALS worker. I know all the PALS workers at one point have contacted me with questions, so they do reach out, which is great. A lot of them know what they're talking about, if not all of them. So it's great to have that on your side. Seek community resources to help with your budget planning. So there's a lot of resources out there and you can get an app called My LNK. And if you need clothes or shoes or help with a uniform for work or housing assistance, or you're having trouble paying your utilities, there is a contact in My LNK app that will help you connect to somebody that can help you. So if you don't make enough money to pay for food or clothes, go find a resource for it. Call me. I'll find a resource for you. Your PALS worker, I know that's their job, is to find those resources for you. So then you can use that money to do something else instead of having it in your budget. Seek a higher paying job. I know that's easier said than done. Don't we all want higher paying jobs? But if you need to get a new job or a higher paying job, that's another way to avoid a payday loan. Start saving. Saving for emergencies. So just in case something happened, payday loans will only offer you up to $500. So if that's what emergency money looks like, can you save $500 for a rainy day? Can you put $500 in cash somewhere or get another bank account so that if anything were to happen, you would have that money? So that's a good starting point for savings. And then start building your credit. Building your credit means you're going to be eligible for loans. If you need them with lower interest rate, things like that. So building your credit is a really great thing to do. But whatever you can do to avoid a payday loan is going to help you. And so though hopefully none of you are in a situation now where you're even considering a payday loan, it is something to consider for the future. What happens if I am in a situation that I need some extra financial support? That's why I have these suggestions on here. Start working on that now so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're being taken advantage of with a payday lender. So that would be the suggestion. There are a lot of resources. If you really wanted to learn about payday loans, how they work, Google it, or YouTube. I just put in stories about payday loans and I got a lot of good information on it. It was very eye opening to see these real life stories about people who have dealt with payday loans. So that is the end of that very intense conversation today. So it wasn't a fun one today because it was all negative banking stuff. But is there any questions about anything we've gone over? Okay. Well, if there ever is, please ask your PALS worker. They can contact me if they don't have an answer for you. And this is my contact information if you do have questions.